It's impeachment the sequel for Donald Trump. After senators vote, a second trial can go ahead. He's accused of incitement to insurrection. Trump's lawyers say it's unconstitutional as he's now a civilian. Protests continue in Myanmar. The military searched the offices of Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party. The leader remains in detention after last week's coup. And a mission to Mars that was more than 6 years in the making. An Emirati probe is successfully orbiting the red planet, hoping to learn about its weather system. Hello and welcome back. I'm Ellen Gainsford. We go straight to the US, where Donald Trump's second impeachment trial kicked off this Tuesday. This time, he's being charged with one item, incitement to insurrection. Senators were played footage from the 6th of January, images that shocked the world, when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building, aiming to prevent Joe Biden's certification as president. Events that left 5 dead. Let's take a listen now to the impeachment manager.
And if the president's arguments for a January exception are upheld, then even if everyone agrees that he's culpable for these events, even if the evidence proves, as we think it definitively does, that the president incited a violent insurrection on the day Congress met to finalize the presidential election, he would have you believe there is absolutely nothing the Senate can do about it. No trial, no facts. He wants you to decide that the Senate is powerless at that point. That can't be right.
Well, for the latest on the trial, we can cross to our Washington correspondent, Ketavan Gorjestani. Thanks for being with us, Ketavan. And events unfolded pretty much as expected today, didn't they, in the Senate?
Yes, the focus of the day was on the question of the constitutionality of this impeachment trial itself. And the vote went as expected because we had had a similar vote just a couple of weeks ago about that same question. And back then, 5 Republicans had joined all of the Democrats to say that, yes, it is constitutional to try a former president. After 4 hours of arguments with the impeachment managers, saying that, yes, it is constitutional because there is no January exception, as we've heard in that soundbite, but also because Donald Trump was in office when he committed these impeachable acts. He was also in office when he was impeached, and therefore the Senate has jurisdiction to try the former president. Not so, said the Donald Trump's defense, saying that he was a private citizen and therefore should not be tried by the Senate, that this was unconstitutional. And it seems that the impeachment managers at least convinced one more Republican to join the ranks of the Democrats, because 6 Republicans sided with the Democrats to say that this was actually constitutional. The senator who was convinced by the arguments was Bill Cassidy. He said that the defense team was disorganized, that they didn't make their case, whereas the impeachment managers actually convinced him that this was really constitutional.
And this is the second time that we're seeing Trump being impeached. And what's likely to be different this time around?
Well, it's likely going to be much faster, and we've already seen that happening with the first part of the impeachment process going extremely quickly. You didn't have those weeks of hearings before the impeachment vote, and you also saw that impeachment article being transferred very quickly to the Senate. You have fewer hours of opening arguments. You're going to have 16 hours for each side. It was 24 last time around. So all of the process is going to go much faster. You're also likely going to see an impeachment process that is going to be a little bit more bipartisan than it was last time around. We saw it in the impeachment vote, 10 Republicans siding with the Democrats. versus 0 last time around. Last time you had one Republican senator voting to convict Donald Trump. That was Mitt Romney. This time we're expecting maybe a handful of Republicans to decide that, yes, they do want to convict Donald Trump for that incitement to insurrection. One thing that is very likely going to be very similar to what we saw last time around is that Donald Trump is very likely going to be acquitted because they would need 17 Republican senators, the Democrats, to join them in order to be able to convict Donald Trump and then maybe possibly disqualify him from ever running for office again. And it doesn't look like they're anywhere near that.
Well, thank you very much for that update. That was France 24's Ketevan Gorgistani bringing us the latest on Donald Trump's impeachment trial. To other world news now. The turmoil continues in Myanmar with another day of protests against the military.
Thanks.
This despite new restrictions on gatherings and a curfew. Demonstrators are calling for a return to democracy after last week's coup. Ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi remains under house arrest. Members of the armed forces raided the headquarters of her National League for Democracy party. Well, the generals are behind the coup in Myanmar, but it's not clear if they have the full backing of the military and the police force. Earlier, Andrew Fagan, who's director of the Human Rights Centre at the University of Essex, gave us his perspective.
I suspect that the will of the generals does not represent the will of the entire army. However, they are extremely well disciplined. They have been incredibly effective, unfortunately, an incredibly effective fighting force now for some considerable time, given the amount of ethnic armed conflict within Myanmar now for decades. They are well trained in that regard. I hear rumors and some anecdotes that the police are less committed, as it were, to this particular cause than some amongst the army, the rank and file in the army as well. So there's a possibility, I suppose, that there could be some division amongst those particular ranks. It's remarkable to see so many astonishingly brave people coming out onto the street, risking their lives increasingly, in fighting for maintaining their democratic rights. So yes, I fear that we're heading in that particular direction. I think this has been coming for some time, to be honest with you. The military have taken a huge gamble in trying to institute this coup, and I can see no other option for them but to try and see it through, and that's going to entail violence, I fear.
Now for the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. Cases of the South African COVID variant are continuing to pop up across Europe, and there are worries that this strain could spread more readily and that some vaccines may not be able to work as well against it. Charlie James has the story.
Austria stepping up its response to an outbreak of the South African COVID variant. As of Tuesday, adults leaving the Alpine province of Tyrol are required to show a negative coronavirus test. This after nearly 300 cases of the mutant strain were confirmed there.
Wir haben uns daher in der Bundesregierung entschieden, die Mobilität aus und nach Tirol einzuschränken. Von Reisen aus und nach Tirol wird derzeit abgeraten.
Extra checks underway along Germany's border with Austria as well. Officers are questioning arrivees to determine if they need to take a test. So far, the South African variant has been detected in more than 30 countries worldwide. In Europe, this includes France, Spain, Italy, and the UK. While the mutation doesn't appear to cause worse illness, there are concerns it spreads more easily and impacts vaccine efficacy.
South Africa announced that it was putting a temporary hold on the rollout of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine after a study showed it was minimally effective at preventing mild to moderate disease caused by a variant first identified in South Africa. This is clearly concerning news.
If Europe's vaccine progress is slowed by variants, it could keep the continent in crisis even longer than expected.
France has passed a grim threshold of more than 80,000 deaths from COVID. Well, after a sluggish start to their vaccine rollout, the health ministry says it's now back on track, with around 4 million people set to receive a jab by the end of February. France 24's Christophe Dansette and Claire Paquelin have visited a vaccination centre just outside of Paris and sent us this report.
Hoping to be vaccinated against COVID-19, this 81-year-old has come to a centre near Paris.
Ça me tape le moral quand même. Hein. J'aimerais tout de même être sécurisée par simplement un rendez-vous. Et j'aimerais qu'on me donne la solution. Et pour l'instant, c'est raté. Bonne journée à tous. Merci, monsieur.
Those who did manage to get a slot spent hours phoning or refreshing the reservation web pages.
Je suis têtue. Voilà, je me suis acharnée. Puis à un moment, ça a marché. J'ai eu beaucoup de chance.
The centre is big enough to vaccinate 200 patients a day, but in reality, it's only reaching a third of its capacity.
C'est notre maigre réserve et importante, qui est le lieu où nous conservons les vaccins.
The fridge is almost empty because of a shortfall in supplies and consequent delays in vaccination deliveries.
Ont été extrêmement difficiles parce que les plannings se sont très vite remplis et très vite nous avons dû arrêter dès que nous avons su qu'il y avait une difficulté dans l'approvisionnement.
Across France, reservations for the first dose of the vaccine are full up until March. Maya, one of the 3 websites tasked by the government with coordinating bookings, says that technically it's ready.
C'est pas tant la responsabilité de Maya d'avoir des disponibilités, c'est plutôt finalement l'afflux de doses en fonction des centres, etc. Et nous, on est tout simplement encalés. Nous, on est vraiment un outil de prise de rendez-vous en ligne pour les centres.
The French government is now counting on the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine to speed up its vaccination programme. Pharmacies will be allowed to administer the jabs too. The government says France is on course to vaccinate between 3.5 and 4 million people by the end of February.
Now, if you're a fan of spy films and intrigue, then this auction will be for you. Hundreds of retro gadgets dating from the Cold War are going up for sale in the US. Most of the items come from New York's KGB Espionage Museum, which closed last year due to the coronavirus pandemic. Olivia Bizot has the story.
You can kind of see where the little hole was where it would pick up the audio.
An ashtray hiding a secret microphone. Fake teeth filled with cyanide poison used as a suicide pill. Cigarette packs concealing cameras. These retro spy devices wouldn't seem out of place in a classic James Bond movie, but they were used by real KGB agents during the Cold War. To the untrained eye, this bag looks like any old handbag.
So you've got the fly, and you'd think it'd be a normal bag, but once you get into it, you've got this whole mechanism. And you'd have a trigger that would likely run on the outside from probably behind the bag that it would run. But that's pretty amazing.
Most of these items come from New York's short-lived KGB Museum, which opened in January 2019 before closing last year due to the pandemic. Some devices, like this replica of a deadly umbrella, are expected to fetch up to $5,000. The original version was used in 1978 to fatally poison Bulgarian dissident Georgy Markov. The collection will go under the hammer at a Beverly Hills auction later this week.
Now to a mission to Mars that was more than 6 years in the making. An Emirati space probe has today successfully entered the orbit of the Red Planet. The Arab world's first space mission, it aims to unlock the secrets of Martian weather. The probe, which is called Amal, and that's the Arabic for hope, blasted off 7 months ago. Charlie James has a story.
The Arab world's first interplanetary mission triumphs. A spacecraft from the United Arab Emirates swung into orbit around Mars 7 months after leaving Earth. Named Amal, the Arabic word for hope, the orbiter now gets to work gathering detailed atmospheric data.
What this means for us, first globally, this is another method by which we can explore other planets. For our science community, science data will come from our very first missions, hopefully getting discoveries about Mars. And for the Arab world, if this is possible, I think we can break lots of bounds that we've self-imposed on ourselves and further develop and enhance and add on to global knowledge.
The fate of the entire mission came down to one very tricky maneuver. The orbiter had to fire its main engines for 27 minutes, slowing the craft enough for it to be captured by Mars's gravity. If anything went wrong, the spacecraft would be lost. After 11 nail-biting minutes, the signal confirming success reached mission control in Dubai. The UAE became just the 5th space agency to reach the Red Planet.
It's proof that this can be done by almost anyone. If the UAE can launch a Mars mission, then Switzerland can launch a Mars mission, and New Zealand can launch a Mars mission, and South Korea or Taiwan can launch Mars. They all have resources on that scale.
This success is a source of immense national pride for the UAE and one step closer to an even larger goal: building a human settlement on Mars within 100 years.
That's all from me for now. Stay with us on France 24. There's more world news coming up.